The morning sun beat down on Felicity Winters' feverish brow as she staggered through the dusty main street of Copper Creek, a town she couldn't recall ever seeing before. Her vision swam, her throat parched as the Arizona desert surrounding the settlement. The year was 1875, and she was lost in more ways than one. "Water," she croaked, reaching out toward a blurry figure on the boardwalk before her knees buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Through the haze of her fever, she glimpsed a weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat, concerned blue eyes studying her. "Madam, can you hear me?" The deep voice seemed to come from far away. Felicity tried to respond, but the world tilted and darkness claimed her. When she awoke, she was lying on a bed in an unfamiliar room. Cool dampness pressed against her forehead a wet cloth. She blinked, trying to orient herself as memories drifted like scattered puzzle pieces. The stagecoach, the robbery, being thrown from her horse while fleeing. "You're awake." The same deep voice from before drew her attention to a man sitting beside the bed. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair and those same concerned blue eyes. He wore simple clothes, a cotton shirt, suspenders, and worn denim pants, a cowboy from the looks of him. "Where am I?" Felicity managed, her voice raspy. "My home in Copper Creek." He offered a tin cup of water. "You collapsed in the street. Doc says you've got a fever and dehydration, but nothing that won't mend with rest." She drank gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Forrester Fletcher Ryder." He took back the empty cup. "And you're—" Felicity hesitated. The events leading to her arrival were hazy, but she remembered enough to know caution was warranted. "Felicity," she said simply. "How long have I been here?" "Since yesterday afternoon." Fletcher stood and moved to the window, adjusting the curtain to block the harsh sunlight. "Doc Hudson came by last night and again this morning. Said you need rest and plenty of fluids." She glanced around the modest but clean bedroom. "This is your home. You live alone." A strange expression crossed his face, hesitation mixed with something else she couldn't name. "Yes." Felicity attempted to sit up, wincing at the throbbing in her head. "Easy," Fletcher cautioned, returning to her side. "You took a nasty fall from whatever brought you here. Found your horse wandering outside town, saddlebags mostly empty." Alarm shot through her. "My belongings, what was left is over there." He nodded toward a small valise on a chair. "Not much, I'm afraid." Felicity closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Everything she had carried with her gone. The money, the letters, the precious family heirloom, all taken by the bandits who'd attacked the stagecoach. "I should go," she said, though she had no idea where. "Go where?" Fletcher asked, his voice gentle but direct. "You're in no condition to travel, and from what I can tell, you've got no money and no one waiting for you." The blunt assessment stung because it was true. Felicity had been traveling to meet her uncle in California, her last living relative, after the illness that had claimed her parents just months apart. But without the letter of introduction or funds, she couldn't prove her identity or pay for her continued journey. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "That'll be Mrs. Peabody from next door," Fletcher said, standing. "She's been helping look after you." Before Felicity could protest, Fletcher had opened the door to reveal a plump, gray-haired woman carrying a covered basket. "How is she?" The woman asked, bustling in without waiting for an invitation. Fletcher cleared his throat. "Mrs. Peabody, I'd like you to meet Felicity." Then, with a directness that left Felicity speechless, he added, "My wife." Felicity's mouth fell open, but before she could correct this outrageous falsehood, Mrs. Peabody was at her bedside, clucking sympathetically. "You poor dear. Fletcher told us how you were visiting family when you fell ill. Such a blessing he found you before continuing on to your new home together." She patted Felicity's hand. "I've brought some broth and biscuits. You need your strength." Felicity's gaze shot to Fletcher, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, his eyes pleading, "Thank you," Felicity managed, confusion and indignation warring within her. "I'll just set up in the kitchen," Mrs. Peabody continued cheerfully. "Fletcher, you should have told us sooner you were bringing a bride back. The whole town's talking about it." The moment the older woman left the room, Felicity hissed, "Your wife. Have you lost your mind?" Fletcher ran a hand through his hair, looking surprisingly abashed for a man who had just fabricated a marriage. "I can explain. Please do." Felicity clutched the blanket, suddenly aware of her state of undress beneath the nightgown someone had put her in. "And who changed my clothes, Mrs. Peabody?" he answered quickly. I wouldn't," he sighed. "Look, when I found you, you were in a bad way, this town. They're good people, but they talk. A single woman staying in a single man's home. Your reputation would be ruined before you even woke up." "So you ruined it differently by claiming me as your wife," Felicity whispered fiercely. "I protected you," he countered. "A married woman commands respect. No one questions her presence or her propriety. And given your circumstances, no money, no connections I could discover, I thought it might buy you time to recover and figure out your next steps." Felicity stared at him, searching for deceit in his earnest face and finding none. "You don't even know me. Why would you do this?" Fletcher looked away, a shadow crossing his features. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be alone in a strange place with no one to turn to." Before she could press him further, Mrs. Peabody called from the other room. Fletcher moved toward the door, then paused. "Please," he said quietly. "Just for now. Once you're well, if you want to leave me," his mouth quirked in a half-smile, "I'll bear the scandal with dignity." Felicity sank back against the pillows, too exhausted to argue further. What choice did she have? At least for now, she had shelter and care. "Fine," she conceded. "But I want the full story of how we supposedly met and married. I won't be caught in contradictions because of your impulsive lie." "Fair enough," Fletcher agreed, visibly relieved. "We'll work it out after you've eaten. For now, rest. Mrs. Ryder." The name sent an odd shiver through her that Felicity attributed to fever, certainly not to the way his blue eyes crinkled when he smiled. By evening, Felicity was strong enough to sit in a chair near the small hearth in Fletcher's main room. Mrs. Peabody had finally departed after extracting a promise that Felicity would attend church on Sunday if she felt well enough, so everyone can meet Fletcher's bride properly. Fletcher placed a steaming cup of tea before her, feeling better, somewhat. Felicity studied him as he moved about the modest cabin with easy familiarity. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a small table, 2 chairs, a comfortable-looking armchair, and basic cooking amenities. Besides the bedroom she'd been in, there appeared to be just one other small room. "Where have you been sleeping?" "Chair in the bedroom to keep an eye on you the first night. Last night, I took the bedroll in the workshop out back." He sat across from her. "I'm a furniture maker by trade." Felicity nodded, taking in this new information. "And now we need to fabricate the story of our whirlwind romance." "How did we meet? Where did we marry? People will ask questions." Fletcher stretched his long legs toward the fire. "I've been away for nearly 2 months. Told folks I was visiting suppliers in Denver, which is true enough. We can say we met there. And I agreed to marry a man I just met." Felicity raised an eyebrow. "People do stranger things out here," Fletcher replied. "But we could say we'd been corresponding before that, through a friend or relative who thought we'd suit." Felicity considered this. "And my background, what have you told them?" "Not much." "That you're from back East Boston, maybe. You were educated there from your accent." "Philadelphia," she corrected. "My father was a professor at the university." Fletcher nodded. "Philadelphia, then. You were traveling to meet your uncle in California when we connected in Denver." "And decided to come here instead," Felicity frowned. "That doesn't explain why I'd abandon my journey to my only living relative." Fletcher's expression softened. "Is that true? Your only relative?" Felicity looked away. "Yes, my parents died last year, 3 months apart. My uncle Herbert is my mother's brother. I've never met him, but he wrote offering me a place in his household after learning of my situation." "I'm sorry," Fletcher said quietly. "We can say your uncle gave his blessing for our marriage but couldn't attend. That you'll visit him later when we're settled." Felicity nodded slowly. The story was taking shape, but something still bothered her. "Why would you do this? Create this elaborate lie for a stranger?" Fletcher was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. "When I found you, you were barely conscious. You kept saying one thing over and over, 'Please help me, they can't find me.'" His blue eyes met hers. "Who are they, Felicity?" A cold feeling washed over her. "I don't know what you mean. I think you do." His voice remained gentle, non-accusatory. "I'm not asking to pry. I'm asking because if you're in trouble, this charade might protect you from more than just gossip." Felicity's hands trembled around her teacup. The memory of men on horseback, the shouting, the gunfire as the stagecoach was attacked, it all came rushing back. There was a robbery, she said finally. The stagecoach I was traveling on, 3 men. They took everything of value but one of them. He recognized my name when the driver called me Miss Winters. He said something to the others. They started asking about my father's work, about papers he might have left. She swallowed hard. When I couldn't tell them what they wanted, they said they'd take me with them. I managed to get to my horse and flee, but I heard them pursuing. I rode hard until the horse threw me. After that, I just walked, trying to find help. Fletcher leaned forward, his expression grim. Your father's work, what did he do exactly? He was a historian and archaeologist. His specialty was Native American cultures of the Southwest. He made several discoveries in recent years that brought him some renown. Felicity hesitated. Before he died, he told me he'd found something significant. Something that could change our understanding of the ancient peoples who lived here. But he never told me what it was, only that the information was in his journal. And these men wanted this journal, Felicity nodded. It was in my belongings. If they recovered my horse and saddlebags after I was thrown, then they have what they were after, Fletcher concluded, which means they shouldn't have reason to keep searching for you. Unless they think I know what's in it, Felicity whispered. I don't, but they might not believe that. Fletcher stood and paced the small room. Then our story serves more purpose than I realized. No one will look for a Miss Winters here. Mrs. Ryder, on the other hand, has lived in Copper Creek for years, as far as anyone needs to know. The magnitude of what he was offering suddenly struck Felicity. Not just shelter and reputation, but protection, safety from men who might still be searching for her. Why would you risk this for me? She asked again. Fletcher stopped pacing and looked at her, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Because 12 years ago, I was the one who needed help. Someone gave it to me when they had no reason to. I swore I'd do the same if I ever had the chance. The simple sincerity in his voice moved her more than flowery declarations could have. Thank you, Felicity said softly. But once I'm well, I should continue to my uncle's. I can't impose on your life indefinitely. Of course, Fletcher agreed, though something like disappointment crossed his face. But there's no rush. Get well first, then we'll figure out your next steps. Felicity nodded, suddenly exhausted again. Fletcher must have noticed because he was at her side immediately, helping her stand. Back to bed with you, he said. Doc said not to overdo it. As he guided her back to the bedroom, Felicity was acutely aware of his hand at her elbow, strong and steady. For the first time since the stagecoach robbery, she felt truly safe. What she couldn't explain was the flutter in her stomach when he called her Mrs. Ryder, as he bid her good night. The next 3 days passed in a blur of visitors as word spread through Copper Creek that Fletcher Ryder had returned with a wife. Felicity, still weak but improving, found herself the center of attention as curious neighbors brought welcoming gifts and barely disguised interest in the new Mrs. Ryder. Fletcher had coached her well on their fabricated history, and Felicity drew on her natural intelligence to maintain the charade. She described a fictional correspondence arranged by her late mother's friend, followed by their meeting in Denver, and a simple ceremony performed by a justice of the peace. Love at first sight, Mrs. Peabody sighed when Felicity recounted their story to her and 3 other ladies of the town during an afternoon visit. How romantic! Felicity caught Fletcher's eye from where he stood near the fireplace. He winked at her, and she felt a blush rise to her cheeks that made their fiction all the more convincing. Fletcher always was a quiet one, observed Mrs. Chambers, the miller's wife. We despaired of him ever finding a bride, especially after, she stopped abruptly, exchanging a glance with the other women. After what? Felicity asked innocently, curious about this man who had taken such an extraordinary step to help her. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room until Mrs. Peabody patted her hand. Never you mind, dear. Ancient history now. The point is, he found you, and we couldn't be happier to welcome you to our community. Later, after the visitors had gone, Felicity confronted Fletcher as he prepared their evening meal. What were they referring to? Mrs. Chambers started to say something about especially after something happened. Fletcher's shoulders tensed as he sliced bread. It's not important. It clearly is, Felicity persisted. These people think I'm your wife. Wouldn't a wife know about her husband's past? Fletcher set down the knife and turned to face her. You're right, he gestured to the table. Sit, I'll tell you. Once they were seated, Fletcher stared at his hands for a long moment before speaking. 5 years ago, I was engaged to a woman named Clara. She was the daughter of one of the founding families of Copper Creek. It was expected that we would marry. 2 weeks before the wedding, she left town with a traveling salesman. No note, no goodbye, just gone. Felicity's heart constricted at the pain evident in his voice. I'm sorry. It was a small scandal at the time, Fletcher continued. Everyone pitied me, which was almost worse than losing her. I threw myself into my work, expanded my furniture business. Eventually, people stopped whispering when I entered a room. He gave a wry smile. And now they'll have something new to whisper about. Me, Felicity said. Us, Fletcher corrected. But at least these whispers come with smiles and congratulations instead of pity. Felicity studied him, seeing him in a new light. The pain of betrayal had left its mark, yet he'd risked further gossip by bringing her a complete stranger into his home and life. Does it bother you? She asked quietly. Pretending to be married to someone you barely know, Fletcher's gaze met hers, unexpectedly intense. Does it bother you? The question hung between them, charged with something Felicity wasn't ready to examine. I asked first, she countered. A slow smile spread across his face. No, it doesn't bother me. You're easy to be around, Felicity. The simple compliment warmed her more than it should have. Well, I'm grateful. Truly, you've shown me extraordinary kindness. Don't mention it. Fletcher broke the moment by standing to serve their meal. Doc Hudson says you should be strong enough to venture out by Sunday. Are you up for church services? Felicity nodded. I think so. It will be good to properly meet everyone. Fair warning, the Reverend will likely want to offer a blessing for our union. Fletcher set a plate of beans, cornbread, and ham before her. Think you can handle that? I've been handling one lie after another for days now, Felicity replied with a small smile. What's one more? Fletcher's answering laugh was rich and genuine, a sound Felicity realized she was coming to enjoy very much. Sunday arrived bright and clear, and Felicity found herself both nervous and excited to finally leave the cabin. Fletcher had procured a dress for her from the general store, a simple blue cotton that complemented her eyes, according to Mrs. Peabody, who had helped her dress. You look beautiful, Fletcher said when she emerged from the bedroom, and the genuine appreciation in his eyes made her breath catch. Fletcher himself cut a handsome figure in his Sunday best, a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and height. Clean-shaven for the occasion, he looked younger, his strong jawline and expressive eyes more prominent. You clean up well yourself, Mr. Ryder, Felicity said lightly, trying to disguise how his appearance affected her. Fletcher offered his arm. Shall we, Mrs. Ryder? The walk to the church gave Felicity her first real look at Copper Creek. It was larger than she'd initially thought, a bustling town with a main street lined with businesses, from the general store and blacksmith to a hotel and even a small newspaper office. Homes radiated outward from the town center, Fletcher's modest cabin situated on the northern edge. As they approached the white steepled church, Felicity's nervousness increased. Every eye turned their way as they climbed the steps, and soon they were surrounded by curious, friendly townspeople eager to meet Fletcher's bride. Fletcher kept a protective arm around her waist, steering her through the introductions with ease. Felicity did her best to remember names and faces: Mayor Thompson and his wife Beatrice, Sheriff Garvey, a tall man with a weathered face and kind eyes, the Harding family with their 5 children ranging from toddler to teenager, and dozens more whose names blurred together. Overwhelmed. Fletcher murmured as they finally took their seats in a pew. A bit, Felicity admitted. Everyone's been welcoming, but I feel guilty deceiving them. We're not hurting anyone, Fletcher assured her, and it's temporary. The reminder of the arrangement's temporary nature brought an unexpected pang. Felicity had been in Copper Creek less than a week, yet already the thought of leaving produced a hollow feeling in her chest. After the service, which included the promised blessing for their marriage that left Felicity feeling more conflicted than ever. They were approached by a distinguished-looking gentleman with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes. James Edwards, Fletcher introduced him. He runs the newspaper and is the closest thing Copper Creek has to a historian. A pleasure, Mrs. Ryder. Edwards shook her hand. Fletcher mentioned your father was a professor of history. I'd love to hear more about his work sometime. Mr. Edwards has a particular interest in the indigenous cultures of the region, Fletcher explained. Much like your father did. Felicity tensed slightly, wondering if Fletcher had revealed too much about her real background. Yes, my father's specialty was archaeological findings related to ancient peoples of the Southwest. Edward's eyes lit up. Fascinating. I've been documenting local artifacts and stories for years. Perhaps you'd both join me for dinner this week. I have some items you might find interesting. We'd be delighted, Fletcher answered before Felicity could respond, as they walked home after declining several other invitations for Sunday dinner in favor of Felicity's still delicate health. She questioned Fletcher about the newspaper editor. Is it wise to encourage his interest in my father's work? What if he makes connections we don't want made? Fletcher guided her around a muddy patch in the road. Edwards is trustworthy, and he's knowledgeable. If anyone might understand why men would be pursuing your father's research, it's him. He might provide insights that could help us understand who was after you. Us. Felicity raised an eyebrow. You've adopted my troubles quite thoroughly, Mr. Ryder. Fletcher's hand tightened briefly on hers where it rested in the crook of his arm. I told you I protect what's mine. The possessive statement, spoken casually but with underlying intensity, sent a thrill through Felicity that she couldn't ignore. Their charade was beginning to feel less like a performance and more like a preview of possibilities she hadn't considered before. Back at the cabin, Fletcher helped her remove her shawl. You did well today. I think everyone was charmed by my new bride. I think they were more interested in what finally convinced the town's confirmed bachelor to take a wife, Felicity countered with a smile. Fletcher's expression softened as he looked at her. Can you blame them? The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken feelings. Felicity was the first to look away, moving toward the kitchen area. I should start dinner. Let me, Fletcher said, following her. You still need to rest. I've been resting for days, Felicity protested. I'm not an invalid anymore. Besides, everyone expects a wife to cook for her husband, and we need to maintain appearances. Fletcher's mouth quirked in that half-smile she was coming to find endearing. Is that so? Well then, by all means, Mrs. Ryder, show me your wifely skills. The teasing challenge in his voice made her laugh. My mother insisted I learn to cook properly, even though we had help at home. She said a woman should never be dependent on others for basic necessities. A wise woman, Fletcher commented, sitting at the table to watch as she began preparing a simple meal from the provisions in his kitchen. As she worked, Fletcher told her more about the town and its inhabitants, which families had been there the longest, whose children were sweethearts, which business owners gave fair prices and which tried to gouge newcomers. Felicity found herself genuinely interested, filing away the information as if she would need it for more than just a temporary stay. The ease between them was startling, as if they had known each other for years, rather than days. Tell me about your furniture making, she said as they ate the stew she'd prepared. Mrs. Chambers mentioned you're known for your craftsmanship well beyond Copper Creek. Pride crossed Fletcher's face. I apprenticed with a master craftsman in St. Louis as a young man. Came west when I was 20, worked odd jobs until I could save enough to set up my own shop. He gestured around the cabin, made most of what you see here. Felicity's gaze traveled over the simple but beautifully crafted furniture, the solid table they sat at, the chairs with their comfortable curved backs, the armchair by the fire with intricate carved details on its arms. It's beautiful work, she said sincerely. You have a gift. Thank you. Fletcher seemed pleased by her praise. I could show you the workshop tomorrow if you're feeling up to it. I'd like that, Felicity replied, realizing she truly meant it. As they cleared the dinner dishes together in companionable silence, Felicity found herself imagining what it would be like if this were real, if she were truly Fletcher's wife. sharing his home and his life. The thought should have alarmed her, yet instead it filled her with a warm, pleasant sensation. That night, as she lay in Fletcher's bed while he once again took the workshop bedroll, Felicity acknowledged a truth she could no longer deny. She was developing feelings for the man who had claimed her as his wife. Feelings that made the temporary nature of their arrangement increasingly painful to contemplate. The next morning, Fletcher took her to his workshop, a spacious outbuilding behind the cabin filled with tools, wood in various stages of preparation, and several pieces of furniture in progress. The smell of sawdust and varnish permeated the air, and sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating the space. "This is where I spend most of my time," Fletcher said, running his hand lovingly over a half-finished rocking chair. Felicity moved through the workshop, admiring the craftsmanship evident in each piece. "These are exquisite," she said, stopping before a small writing desk with delicate inlay work. "You're an artist," Fletcher shrugged, though she could tell her praise pleased him. "I enjoy creating things that will be part of people's lives for generations. There's something satisfying about knowing a child might learn to write at one of my desks, or a couple might rock their baby in one of my chairs." The sentiment touched her. "My father had a desk that had belonged to his grandfather. He said he felt connected to him whenever he worked at it." "Exactly." Fletcher's smile was warm. "That's why I try to put something of myself into each piece." Felicity moved to where he stood beside a large table laid out with tools. "Show me how you work." Fletcher hesitated. "It's dusty work. Your dress will wash," Felicity finished. "Please, I'd like to see." Something in her earnest request seemed to move him. Fletcher picked up a piece of cherry wood and demonstrated how he assessed its grain and potential. His hands, large and calloused, moved with surprising delicacy as he showed her the proper way to hold various tools. When he guided her hands on a small carving tool, standing close behind her, Felicity was intensely aware of his chest against her back, his breath warm on her neck. The simple task of shaving curls from a piece of wood became an intimate dance as he adjusted her grip, his fingers enveloping hers. "Like this," he murmured, and Felicity wasn't sure if the shiver that ran through her was from his touch or the vibration of his voice so close to her ear. The workshop door banged open, making them both jump apart like guilty teenagers. Sheriff Garvey stood in the doorway, his expression grim. "Fletcher," he said with a nod. "Mrs. Ryder, sorry to interrupt, but there's something you both should know." Felicity's heart pounded. Had someone discovered their deception? Or worse, had the men who'd pursued her tracked her to Copper Creek? Fletcher moved protectively to her side. "What is it, Sheriff?" 3 men rode into town this morning, rough-looking sorts. "They're asking questions about a young woman traveling alone, a Miss Winters from back east." The sheriff's keen eyes moved between them. "Said she might have information about a valuable archaeological find, offering a reward for anyone who's seen her." Felicity clutched Fletcher's arm, fear washing through her. "Did you tell them anything?" "No, madam," Garvey assured her. "Fact is, no one in Copper Creek has seen a Miss Winters. Only newcomer we've had is Mrs. Ryder." His emphasis on her false married name made it clear he suspected something wasn't right, but was choosing not to press the issue. "Thought you should know they're asking around, though. They're over at the hotel now." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "Thank you, Sheriff. We appreciate the warning." Garvey nodded, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Funny thing, I don't much care for men who chase after lone women with stories that don't quite add up. Think I'll keep an eye on our visitors while they're in town." He tipped his hat. "Good day to you both." After he left, Felicity's legs gave out. Fletcher guided her to a bench, his arm steady around her waist. "They found me," she whispered. "How? They might not know you're here," Fletcher reasoned, though his expression was troubled. "They could be checking every town in the territory." "But why? They have my father's journal. What more could they want from me?" Fletcher knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his. "I don't know, but I meant what I said the day you woke up in my home. I'll protect you, Felicity." The fierce sincerity in his eyes steadied her. "What should we do?" "For now, nothing that would draw attention. You're Mrs. Ryder, a happily married woman who's lived here for exactly 8 days. We go about our business, keep you visible but not conspicuous." Fletcher squeezed her hands. And I don't let you out of my sight until those men leave town. The promise should have reassured her, but Felicity couldn't shake her fear. What if they recognize me? You were feverish and barely conscious when you arrived. And you look different now, rested, properly dressed, your hair styled as a married woman's. Fletcher's gaze traveled over her face. Besides, they'll be looking for a terrified, solitary young woman. Not a confident wife protected by a husband and an entire town that's accepted her as one of their own. Felicity drew strength from his confidence. You're right, we just need to continue the charade until they leave. Exactly. Fletcher stood and helped her to her feet. Starting with dinner at the Edwards home tonight, we already accepted the invitation and canceling now might seem suspicious. Felicity nodded, though anxiety still churned in her stomach. I'll be ready. That evening, dressed in her blue Sunday dress, the only proper attire, she possessed Felicity walked arm in arm with Fletcher to James Edwards' substantial home near the center of town. Fletcher had insisted on taking a route that avoided the hotel where the strangers were staying, and Felicity had gratefully agreed. Edwards welcomed them warmly, introducing his wife Martha, a pleasant woman with lively eyes and a ready smile. Their home reflected the newspaper editor's scholarly interests. Bookshelves lined the walls, and glass display cases held artifacts and curiosities from the region. Mrs. Ryder, Edwards said after dinner had been cleared away, Fletcher mentioned your father studied the ancient peoples of this region. I'd be fascinated to hear more about his work. Felicity glanced at Fletcher, who nodded encouragingly. My father was particularly interested in the migration patterns and cultural exchanges between different indigenous groups, she began carefully. His most recent work before his passing involved artifacts that suggested trade networks extending much further than previously believed. Edwards leaned forward, clearly intrigued. Did he publish his findings? He was preparing to, Felicity replied, the familiar grief tightening her throat. He kept detailed journals of his research. Unfortunately, they were lost when he died. It wasn't entirely a lie. The journal the bandits had stolen had been one of several her father had maintained throughout his career. The others remained in Philadelphia, awaiting her return, a return that seemed increasingly unlikely. A tremendous loss, Edwards said sympathetically. I've been collecting local stories and artifacts for years. Nothing as scholarly as your father's work, I'm sure, but I've documented some fascinating items. He rose and moved to one of the display cases. Perhaps this might interest you. He returned with a small stone tablet covered in unfamiliar markings. Found near an abandoned mining claim south of here. I believe it's similar to artifacts discovered at ancient Pueblo sites, though the markings are distinctive. Felicity examined the tablet carefully, recognition dawning. My father documented similar markings in New Mexico. He believed they represented a specialized communication system between different settlements, possibly related to trade routes or resource locations. Edward's eyes lit up. Exactly my theory. The tablet was found near a natural spring that never runs dry, even in drought years. I believe it may have been a marker for travelers. The conversation continued, with Edwards showing Felicity more artifacts and maps he had collected. Fletcher participated occasionally, but mostly watched Felicity with undisguised admiration as she discussed archaeological theories and historical contexts with growing animation. Your wife is as knowledgeable as she is beautiful, Fletcher, Edwards commented at one point, making Felicity blush. Don't I know it? Fletcher replied, his gaze warm on hers. I'm a fortunate man. The evening continued pleasantly until Martha Edwards mentioned the strangers in town. Such disagreeable-looking men, she said with a shudder. Sheriff Garvey says they're looking for someone, a young woman. Felicity tensed, but Fletcher's hand found hers under the table, his steady pressure calming her. The sheriff mentioned it, Fletcher said casually. Something about archaeological research, wasn't it? Edwards nodded. Yes, they came by the newspaper office this afternoon. Asked if I'd heard of a Professor Winters from Philadelphia or his daughter, said they were associates looking to continue his research. Felicity's heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. What did you tell them? She asked, striving to keep her voice steady. that I hadn't encountered the professor's work personally, though I was familiar with the field. Edwards studied Felicity with shrewd eyes. I also mentioned that Copper Creek had welcomed no single women, recently only Fletcher Ryder's new wife, who had been happily settled here for some time. The deliberate lie, for Edwards knew perfectly well she had arrived just days ago, confirmed what Felicity had suspected. The newspaper editor had guessed at least part of the truth, but had chosen to protect her. "Thank you," Fletcher said simply. Edwards waved a hand dismissively. "I disliked them on sight. Too many questions, too few straight answers." He looked directly at Felicity. "Whatever they're after, Mrs. Ryder, I doubt their intentions are scholarly." The walk home was tense, both of them scanning the darkened streets for any sign of the strangers. When they reached the safety of the cabin, Felicity's composure finally broke. She sank into a chair, trembling. "They won't give up," she said. "They know I'm the professor's daughter. They'll keep searching." Fletcher poured her a small measure of whiskey. "Edwards bought us time. They'll likely move on to the next town soon." Felicity took a sip, the liquor burning a path down her throat. "What if they don't? What if they somehow discover who I am? Then we'll deal with that if it happens." Fletcher knelt before her chair. "Felicity, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "I won't let anyone harm you," he said with quiet intensity. "I promise you that." The certainty in his voice steadied her. This man, who had been a stranger just days ago, had become her protector, her ally, and something more she wasn't ready to name. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. "You could send me away, avoid all this trouble." Fletcher's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle. "Because from the moment I saw you stumbling down that street, something told me you were important. I didn't know why then." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I'm starting to understand now." The tenderness in his gaze made her breath catch. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Fletcher leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a soft, questioning kiss. Felicity's eyes fluttered closed, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. The kiss deepened, becoming something warm and promising that made her heart race for reasons entirely unrelated to fear. When Fletcher finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "I shouldn't have done that," he said hoarsely. "You're vulnerable, and Felicity pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't apologize, please." Fletcher caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent shivers through her. "This isn't part of our arrangement," he said. "I need you to know that. Whatever happens between us, it's real, not pretend." The distinction mattered enormously. Felicity nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I know." He helped her stand, his hands lingering at her waist. "You should rest, it's been a long day." Felicity knew he was right, but the thought of returning to the bedroom alone seemed suddenly empty. "Fletcher," she began hesitantly, "I don't want to be alone tonight, not because I'm afraid, but because—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but understanding dawned in his eyes. "I'll sleep in the chair," he offered. "Just to be near." "Thank you," Felicity whispered, relieved he understood she wasn't ready for more, despite the kiss they'd shared. That night, as she drifted towards sleep with Fletcher's reassuring presence nearby, Felicity realized that her feelings for this man had progressed far beyond gratitude. Whether it had been his steadfast protection, his genuine respect for her intelligence, or the tender care he'd shown since the moment they met, she was falling in love with Fletcher Ryder. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The next morning, Felicity awoke to find Fletcher already up and dressed, a troubled expression on his face. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting up in bed. "The men are still in town," he said. "Mrs. Peabody stopped by early with biscuits and news. They've been asking more questions, offering money for information." Felicity's momentary peace evaporated. "About me, about newcomers in general, but yes, they described you, young woman, educated, traveling alone." Fletcher ran a hand through his hair. "They've booked rooms at the hotel for another night at least." Felicity rose and quickly dressed behind the privacy screen, her mind racing. "What should we do?" "Continue as we have been," Fletcher said. "You're Mrs. Ryder, and everyone in town accepts that. We just need to be careful, avoid direct contact with them." "And if that fails," Felicity emerged, fastening the last button on her dress. Fletcher's expression hardened. "Then we have other options." Before she could ask what he meant, a knock sounded at the door. Fletcher motioned for her to stay back as he answered it. Sheriff Garvey stood on the threshold, his expression grim. "Morning, Fletcher. Mrs. Ryder, mind if I come in?" Fletcher stepped aside and Garvey entered, removing his hat. His eyes assessed Felicity with a frankness that made her nervous. "Those men in town," he began without preamble, "they're not what they claim to be." "What do you mean?" Fletcher asked. "Got a telegraph from the marshal in Prescott this morning. They're wanted for questioning in connection with a stagecoach robbery near Flagstaff 2 weeks ago. 3 passengers killed, including the driver." Garvey's gaze fixed on Felicity. One survivor reported that the bandits seemed particularly interested in a young woman passenger who escaped during the chaos. Felicity's legs weakened, and she sank into a chair. "Those people died because of me." "No, madam," Garvey said firmly. "They died because ruthless men valued money and whatever they were after more than human lives. Not your doing." Fletcher moved to Felicity's side, his hand squeezing her shoulder. "What are you planning to do, Sheriff?" "My job," Garvey replied simply. "I'll arrest them on suspicion and hold them until the marshal arrives." He paused. "But I need to know what they're after. And why Mrs. Ryder here arrived in town with nothing but the clothes on her back and a story that doesn't quite line up with the facts." Felicity exchanged a glance with Fletcher, who nodded slightly. "My name is Felicity Winters," she began. "My father was Professor Franklin Winters of the University of Pennsylvania. He died last year after completing significant research on ancient trading routes and settlements in this region. These men attacked the stagecoach I was traveling on and specifically targeted me when they learned my name. They wanted my father's journal, which contained details of his discoveries." Garvey listened without interruption, his weathered face betraying nothing. When she finished, he simply asked, "And what was in this journal that was worth killing for?" "I don't know," Felicity admitted. "My father told me before he died that he'd found something significant, something that could change our understanding of the ancient peoples who lived here. But he never specified what it was." "But these men seem to think you know," Garvey observed. "Yes, I tried to convince them I didn't, but they didn't believe me." Felicity shuddered at the memory. "I managed to escape during the attack, but they pursued me. I rode until my horse threw me, then walked until I collapsed here in Copper Creek, where Fletcher found you and claimed you as his wife," Garvey finished, a hint of amusement crossing his face. "Bold move, Ryder." Fletcher didn't smile. It seemed the best way to protect her at the time. "Can't argue with results," Garvey acknowledged. "No one in town has questioned it for a moment. You two have everyone convinced you're blissfully married." His shrewd eyes moved between them. "Some of that might not even be pretend from what I can see." Felicity felt heat rise to her cheeks, but Fletcher merely tightened his grip on her shoulder. "What happens now?" he asked. "I'll handle the men," Garvey said. "But Mrs. Winters or Ryder, whichever you prefer, should prepare to give a statement to the marshal when he arrives. As the only witness to the stagecoach attack who can identify these men, your testimony will be crucial." Felicity nodded, though the thought of confronting the men who had pursued her filled her with dread. "In the meantime," Garvey continued, "I suggest you both continue exactly as you have been. Those men don't know we're onto them yet, and I'd like to keep it that way until I can safely take them into custody." After the sheriff left, promising to send word once the men were secured, Felicity's composure crumbled. "All those people," she whispered. "Dead because of whatever my father discovered." Fletcher knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "This is not your fault," he said firmly. "You can't blame yourself for the actions of cruel men." "But what could possibly be worth such violence?" Felicity asked. "My father was a scholar, not a treasure hunter. His work was about understanding history, not profiting from it." Fletcher was quiet for a moment, considering. "Perhaps we should speak with Edwards again. If anyone might have insight into what your father could have discovered that would prompt such pursuit, it's him." "You're right," Felicity agreed, grasping at the suggestion. "He knows the region's history better than anyone in town." They found Edwards at the newspaper office, setting type for the weekly edition. When Felicity explained the situation, including her true identity and the sheriff's revelations about the men in town, the editor listened with increasing concern. These men believe your father discovered something of significant value, Edwards mused, pacing among his cluttered bookshelves. And they think you know what it is despite your denials. Yes, Felicity confirmed. They kept asking about the location when they attacked the stagecoach. My father never mentioned any specific location to me, only that his research had led to an important discovery. Edwards stopped suddenly, pulling a book from a shelf. Your father's specialty was trade routes, correct? Connections between different settlements. Yes, particularly how goods and cultural practices moved between communities that traditional history suggested had little contact. Edwards opened the book, a collection of maps and geological surveys, and spread it on his desk. For years, there have been rumors of a lost silver deposit somewhere in this region. The Spanish searched for it but never found it. Local tribes spoke of a white metal that was sacred, used only for special purposes. Fletcher leaned over the map. You think Professor Winters found this lost silver mine, not necessarily the mine itself, Edwards clarified, but perhaps evidence of its existence and location. He tapped the map. Trade artifacts made of silver have been found in settlements that had no known access to silver deposits. Your father might have connected the dots, traced the artifacts back to their source through the trade routes he was studying. Felicity considered this. It's possible. He was excited about his latest findings, said they would rewrite the history books. She frowned. But how would these men know about my father's discovery? His research wasn't widely publicized. Academic circles can be surprisingly small, Edwards pointed out. Someone could have heard rumors, connected your father's research to the old legends of silver, and decided it was worth pursuing by any means necessary. The theory made sense, fitting the fragments Felicity knew. So they think I know the location of this silver deposit because I'm his daughter. And they won't believe you don't know, because from their perspective, why wouldn't a father share such a valuable discovery with his only child? Edward's expression was grave. Men like that don't easily accept that what they want doesn't exist. Fletcher's jaw tightened. All the more reason to let Sheriff Garvey handle them. As if summoned by his name, the office door opened to admit the sheriff, his expression tight with controlled anger. They're gone, he announced without preamble. Must have gotten wind that I was asking questions. Left the hotel before I could get to them. Felicity's stomach dropped. Gone where? Don't know, Garvey admitted. But they didn't leave town by the main roads. My deputy's checking the livery now to see if they took their horses. Fletcher's arm came around Felicity protectively. If they've fled, that's good news. It means they're running from the law, not staying to pursue Felicity. Maybe, Garvey allowed, but I don't like it. Men like that don't give up easily on something they think is valuable. He turned to Edwards. Any insights on what they might be after? As Edwards explained his silver mine theory, Felicity leaned into Fletcher's steady presence, drawing strength from him. The events of the past 2 weeks seemed like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake the stagecoach attack, her desperate flight, collapsing in a strange town, and now the revelation that innocent people had died because of whatever her father had discovered. Yet amid this nightmare, Fletcher had been her constant protector, not just physically, but emotionally, giving her safety, respect, and increasingly, affection that she returned with growing certainty. Should return to your home, Garvey was saying as Felicity refocused on the conversation. Stay there until we know more. I'll post a deputy nearby just in case. Fletcher nodded. Thank you, Sheriff. We'll be careful. As they walked home, Fletcher kept Felicity close, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. The town seemed unchanged, people going about their business, children playing, horses and wagons moving along the main street, yet everything felt different, tinged with threat. I'm sorry, Felicity said when they reached the cabin. I've brought nothing but trouble to your door. Fletcher guided her inside and secured the door before responding. You've brought far more than trouble, Felicity. His voice was soft but intense. You've brought life back to this house. To me. The simple declaration, spoken without dramatic flair but with deep sincerity, moved her profoundly. Fletcher, whatever she might have said, was lost as his lips found hers, more urgent than their first kiss yet still achingly tender. Felicity melted into him, her arms twining around his neck as she returned the kiss with equal fervor. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I know this isn't the right time," he murmured, "with everything that's happening. But I needed you to know, whatever comes next, however this ends, what I feel for you is real." "I feel it too," Felicity whispered, the admission both frightening and liberating. "I never expected to find you when I started this journey, but now I can't imagine my life without you in it." Fletcher's arms tightened around her. "Then stay. Not because you have to, not because of our pretense, but because you want to. Stay with me, Felicity. Be my wife in truth, not just in name." The proposal, simple and heartfelt, brought tears to her eyes. "Are you certain? You barely know me." "I know enough," Fletcher insisted. "I know you're brave and intelligent. I know you face challenges with grace. I know I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you." His hand cupped her cheek. "The rest we can discover together." Felicity searched his face, finding only sincerity and warmth in his blue eyes. "Yes," she said finally, her heart full. "Yes, I'll stay. I'll be your wife, your real wife." The joy that spread across Fletcher's face was answer enough, but he sealed their agreement with another kiss that promised a future neither had anticipated when they'd first met just over a week ago. Their celebration was short-lived. A sharp knock at the door sent them springing apart like guilty children. Fletcher motioned for Felicity to stay back as he approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" he called. "Deputy Miller," came the response. "Sheriff sent me to keep watch." "Thought you should know those men's horses are still at the livery. They didn't leave town, just the hotel." Fletcher opened the door to reveal a young man in a deputy's badge, looking nervous but determined. "Come in," Fletcher invited. "Tell us what you know." Miller stepped inside, nodding respectfully to Felicity. "Not much to tell. They paid for their rooms through tonight but cleared out their belongings. Livery owner says they haven't collected their horses. Sheriff thinks they might be lying low somewhere in town or nearby." "Or they found other transportation," Fletcher suggested grimly. Miller nodded. "Sheriff thought of that. He's checking if anyone's missing a wagon or horses. In the meantime, he asked me to keep an eye on your place." He patted the revolver at his hip. "I'll be outside, out of sight but watching." After the deputy left to take up his position, Fletcher checked that his own rifle was loaded and within easy reach. "We should be safe with Miller watching," he said, though his expression remained troubled. "What if they come back?" Felicity asked, voicing the fear that had lodged in her throat. "What if they've realized who I am?" Fletcher took her hands in his. "Then we face them together. But Felicity, listen to me, they're running from the law now. Their priority will be escaping the territory, not pursuing you." She wanted to believe him, but anxiety still gnawed at her. "I can't help feeling that this isn't over." "It will be soon," Fletcher promised. "The marshal will come, those men will be captured, and we can begin our life together properly." He smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "Starting with a real wedding, if you'd like. One where you actually agree to marry me." The thought brought a genuine smile to Felicity's face. "I would like that. Though explaining to everyone in town that we weren't already married might be awkward," Fletcher chuckled. "We'll figure something out. Maybe a renewal of vows to celebrate our return to Copper Creek after our honeymoon in Denver." Felicity's laughter joined his, the tension easing slightly. "You're becoming quite adept at constructing these stories, Mr. Ryder. Only where you're concerned, Mrs. Ryder." His use of the name, once a deception, now held promise rather than pretense. They spent the remainder of the day in forced normalcy, Fletcher working on smaller woodworking projects inside the cabin rather than in his workshop. Felicity preparing meals and reading from Edward's books on local history. Every noise outside brought them to alert stillness, but each time it proved to be nothing concerning. As evening fell, Deputy Miller reported that the sheriff had found no sign of the missing men nor any stolen transportation. The town had been thoroughly searched, leading Garvey to believe they might have fled on foot to avoid detection, planning to steal horses elsewhere. Sheriff says to stay vigilant, but he thinks the immediate danger has passed, Miller informed them before resuming his watch for the night. Despite this reassurance, neither Felicity nor Fletcher slept easily. Fletcher insisted on taking the chair in the bedroom again, his rifle within reach, while Felicity lay awake in bed, listening to every creak and rustle of the night. She must have dozed eventually, for the sound of breaking glass jolted her from sleep. Fletcher was already on his feet, rifle in hand. "Stay down," he whispered urgently as something thudded against the front door of the cabin. Felicity scrambled out of bed, crouching behind it as Fletcher moved cautiously toward the bedroom doorway. The acrid smell of smoke reached her nostrils, followed by a rising orange glow visible through the window. "Fire," Fletcher shouted. "They've set fire to the front porch." Felicity's heart pounded as she grabbed her dress, pulling it on hurriedly over her nightgown. "Where's Deputy Miller?" Fletcher's expression was grim. "I don't know." He should have. A groan from outside interrupted him. Fletcher risked a glance through the window, his face hardening. "Miller's down. Can't tell if he's alive." The crackling of flames grew louder, accompanied by the ominous splintering of wood. "The back door," Fletcher decided, moving quickly to Felicity's side. "We need to get out before the fire spreads." He led her through the darkened cabin toward the rear exit, but as they reached it, the door burst inward. 3 men stood silhouetted against the night sky, one holding a lantern, 2 with guns drawn. "Professor Winters' daughter, I presume," said the leader, a tall man with a jagged scar across his cheek. "Finally found you." Fletcher raised his rifle, positioning himself between Felicity and the intruders. "You're making a mistake. This is my wife, save it," the scarred man snapped. "We know who she is." The whole wife's story was clever, but not clever enough. His cold eyes fixed on Felicity. "Now, Miss Winters, you're going to tell us exactly what your father discovered about the silver mine, or we'll burn this place to the ground with both of you in it." "I don't know anything about a silver mine," Felicity insisted, her voice steadier than she felt. "My father never told me what he discovered." The man's face twisted with frustration. "You expect me to believe he didn't share the location with his own daughter?" "The journal had maps, symbols, but not the key to understanding them. You have that key." "The journal was all he had," Felicity countered. "If there was more, he took it to his grave." One of the other men shifted nervously. "Daggett, the fire's spreading fast. Town'll see it soon. We need to go." The leader Daggett seemed to consider this, then made a decision. "Bring her. She'll talk eventually." To Fletcher, he added, "Drop the rifle or I'll put a bullet in her right now." Fletcher's muscles tensed, his finger on the trigger. In that frozen moment, Felicity saw him calculating, weighing impossible options. "Fletcher," she said softly. "Don't." With visible reluctance, Fletcher lowered the rifle. The moment he did, one of Daggett's men struck him across the temple with a pistol butt. Fletcher crumpled to the floor. "No." Felicity screamed, lunging toward him, but rough hands grabbed her arms, dragging her backward. "He's not dead," Daggett said coldly. "Not yet. Whether he stays that way depends on you cooperating." As they pulled her from the burning cabin, Felicity caught a final glimpse of Fletcher's still form on the floor. Tears streamed down her face, but determination hardened within her. She would find a way back to him. Whatever happened, she would return to the man she loved. The men had horses waiting in the trees behind the cabin. Felicity was forced onto one, her hands bound to the saddle horn. As they rode away, she looked back to see the cabin fully engulfed in flames, the fire painting the night sky with hellish light. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded as they pushed the horses into a gallop. "Somewhere you can remember what your father told you," Daggett replied ominously. "The old mining camp up in the hills. Plenty of privacy there for you to refresh your memory." Felicity's mind raced. These men believed she knew something she didn't, and she doubted they would accept the truth easily. Her only hope was to buy time, to somehow alert others to her location, or to escape herself. They rode hard for what felt like hours, following game trails and old mining paths that wound up into the rugged hills north of Copper Creek. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they reached a cluster of dilapidated buildings the abandoned mining camp Daggett had mentioned. The men dismounted, roughly pulling Felicity from her horse. Her legs nearly buckled after the long ride, but she forced herself to stand straight, refusing to show weakness. "Get her inside," Daggett ordered, indicating a sagging cabin that had once likely housed the mine supervisor. "Then check the perimeter. Make sure we weren't followed." Inside the cabin, Felicity was pushed onto a rickety chair, her hands retied behind her. Dust and cobwebs covered the sparse furnishings, and the floorboards creaked ominously beneath their weight. "Now," Daggett said, pulling another chair close and sitting to face her, "let's try this again. What did your father discover about the silver mine?" "I've told you the truth," Felicity insisted. "My father never specified what his discovery was. He only said it was significant." Daggett leaned forward, his scarred face inches from hers. "Your father's journal contained maps, routes, markings that match old Spanish records of a lost silver deposit, but there's a piece missing the key location. He would have told you." "He didn't," Felicity maintained. "Whatever you think I know, I don't." The slap came without warning, snapping her head to the side. Stars burst across her vision, and she tasted blood where her lip had split. "Don't lie to me," Daggett hissed. "We didn't come this far to leave empty-handed." Felicity straightened, meeting his gaze defiantly. "Killing innocent people on that stagecoach, burning a man's home, all for silver that might not even exist." Something ugly flashed in Daggett's eyes. "Oh, it exists. Spanish records describe a vein so rich it would make a man a king. Your father found it or found how to find it, and you're going to tell me." One of his men burst through the door. "Ryder's coming, at least 5, maybe more," Daggett cursed, drawing his pistol. "How far?" "Half-mile, moving fast." "Get ready," Daggett ordered. To Felicity, he added, "One sound from you, and I'll put a bullet in your head." "Understand," she nodded, hope flaring within her. "Ryder's coming, but who? The sheriff." Had Fletcher somehow survived and brought help? The men positioned themselves at the cabin's grimy windows, guns ready. Felicity strained against her bonds, trying to loosen them, but the ropes held fast. The thunder of approaching horses grew louder, then slowed. A voice called out, clear and commanding, "Daggett, this is Sheriff Garvey. We know you're in there. Send out the woman and surrender yourselves." Felicity's heart leaped. They had found her, Daggett's face contorted with fury. How did they find us so quickly? His suspicious gaze fell on Felicity. "No matter, we still have leverage." He moved behind her, pressing his pistol to her temple. "Sheriff," he shouted, "we've got the woman. Any attempt to rush us and she dies." A tense silence followed. Then a different voice called out, one that made Felicity's heart soar. "Daggett, this is Fletcher Ryder. Let my wife go and you might leave here alive." Fletcher was alive. Relief washed through Felicity, nearly overwhelming her. The blow to his head hadn't killed him, and he'd somehow escaped the burning cabin. Daggett laughed harshly. "Your wife, Ryder, we all know that's a lie. She's coming with us, along with what she knows about the silver." "She doesn't know anything," Fletcher shouted back. The professor's research was academic, not treasure hunting. "There's no map, no secret location, just historical documentation of trade routes." "He's lying to protect her," Daggett told his men. To Fletcher he called, "You have 1 minute to back off, or I start sending out pieces of her." Felicity knew they were at an impasse. Daggett wouldn't surrender, and Fletcher and the sheriff couldn't risk rushing the cabin while she was held at gunpoint. An idea formed in her mind, desperate, perhaps suicidal, but possibly their only chance. "The tablet," she said quietly. Daggett's attention snapped to her. "What?" "The stone tablet that Edwards showed me," Felicity continued, her voice gaining strength. "The one with markings similar to what my father documented. It's not just a marker for a water source, it's a map reference point. One of several that, when connected, lead to the silver deposit." Daggett's eyes narrowed. "Now we're getting somewhere. Where are the others?" "I can show you," Felicity offered, "but not from in here. The locations are specific landscape features. I need to see the terrain." Suspicion warred with greed on Daggett's face. "This better not be a trick." "It's not," Felicity assured him, her heart pounding. "But you need to let me talk to them, convince them to back off so we can leave. Otherwise, none of us gets what we want." After a moment's hesitation, Daggett nodded. "Fine, but one wrong word and you're dead." He dragged her to the door, pistol still pressed to her head. "Sheriff," he called, "the woman wants to talk." "I'm listening," came Garvey's cautious response. Felicity took a deep breath. "Sheriff Fletcher, I'm unharmed for now. These men believe my father discovered a lost silver mine. I've agreed to help them locate it if they'll leave peacefully afterward." She infused her voice with what she hoped was convincing resignation. "Please, let us go. No one else needs to get hurt." "Felicity, no." Fletcher's anguished voice carried clearly. "Whatever they want, it's not worth your life. It's my choice," she called back, praying he would understand her true intent. "I just need to show them the markers my father identified, like the stone tablet in Edward's collection. The one with directional symbols pointing to natural landmarks." There was a pause, then Edward's voice joined the conversation. "The tablet, you think it's connected to the silver?" "Yes," Felicity confirmed, hope rising. Edwards was here and she trusted him to pick up on her clues. "It's one of several markers forming a star pattern when mapped. Each marker points to the next, with the center being the location of the silver deposit." "A clever system," Edwards replied, his tone thoughtful. "Ancient peoples marking the route to a sacred site, each marker visible from the previous one. The tablet I showed you would be the first point, overlooking the spring south of town." Felicity silently blessed the newspaperman's quick understanding. He was fabricating details to support her story, giving Daggett exactly what he thought he wanted. "That's right," she agreed. "And from there, each marker is visible if you know what to look for." Daggett's grip on her arm tightened. "Enough talk. Tell them to back off so we can leave." "Please," Felicity called to her would-be rescuers. "Stand down, let us pass. I'll be fine once I've shown them what they want." A tense silence followed. Then Sheriff Garvey's voice, "Daggett, we're pulling back to give you clear passage. But hear this, you harm one hair on her head, and there won't be a place in this territory you can hide from me. We'll be following at a distance." "Smart decision," Daggett called back, satisfaction evident in his voice. To his men, he muttered, "Get the horses ready. We're heading to that spring Edwards mentioned." As Daggett dragged her outside, Felicity caught her first glimpse of Fletcher since the cabin. He stood with the sheriff and several deputies, his face bruised and smoke-smudged, clothes singed and torn. Their eyes met across the distance, volumes of unspoken emotion passing between them. "I love you," she mouthed silently. Fletcher's expression tightened with determination as he gave an almost imperceptible nod. The message was clear. He was coming for her. Daggett forced her onto a horse, keeping his gun trained on her as they mounted up. With one man leading and another following, they rode out of the abandoned mining camp, taking a trail that wound back down toward Copper Creek. Felicity rode in tense silence, her mind working furiously. The plan she'd improvised was dangerous, leading Daggett to a non-existent series of markers while hoping Fletcher and the others would find an opportunity to intervene. But it was the only chance she had. They reached the spring Edwards had mentioned by mid-morning. It was a small, clear pool nestled among rocks, with a view of the surrounding landscape. "Where's the marker?" Daggett demanded, scanning the area. "There," Felicity pointed to a distinctive rock formation nearby. "Those stacked stones aren't natural. They're a pointer, aligned with specific features in the landscape." Daggett studied the formation skeptically. "And this tells us what, exactly?" "The direction to the next marker," Felicity explained, inventing details as she went. "See how the top stone has that notch? If you sight through it toward the mountains, it points to a specific peak. That's where we'll find the next marker." For nearly an hour, she led them on a carefully paced wild goose chase, identifying natural features as supposed markers, always moving them toward the next clue. She kept the pace deliberate, not so fast that they'd quickly realize the deception, but not so slow that they'd grow suspicious of her stalling. All the while, she knew Fletcher and the sheriff were following, waiting for their moment. She just had to keep Daggett believing, keep him moving in circles without actually reaching any destination. By early afternoon, Daggett's patience was wearing thin. "We've been following these supposed markers for hours," he growled. "How much farther to the silver?" "The final marker should be just ahead," Felicity improvised, pointing to a distinctive rock outcropping. "From there, we should be able to see the entrance to the mine." As they approached the outcropping, Felicity sensed Daggett's growing suspicion. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the landscape, finding nothing that resembled a mine entrance. "Where is it?" he demanded, his voice dangerous. "I need to check the exact alignment," Felicity stalled, dismounting from her horse. The entrance would be concealed, possibly covered by rockfall over the years. Daggett followed her, grabbing her arm roughly. "No more games, Miss Winters. Where is the silver?" Felicity met his gaze steadily. There is no silver mine, at least not one my father discovered. His research was purely academic. Rage twisted Daggett's features. You've been leading us in circles. Yes, Felicity admitted, bracing herself for his reaction. Just as you've been chasing a myth. Whatever my father discovered, it wasn't treasure. Daggett raised his hand to strike her, but a rifle shot cracked through the air, the bullet kicking up dust at his feet. That's far enough, Daggett. Sheriff Garvey's voice rang out from behind a nearby ridge. Let her go and drop your weapons. Chaos erupted as Daggett's men scrambled for cover, drawing their guns. Daggett himself dragged Felicity backward, using her as a shield as bullets flew around them. It's over, Daggett, Fletcher's voice called from somewhere to their right. You're surrounded. Daggett's arm tightened around Felicity's throat. Not while I have her. Felicity struggled against his grip, her eyes scanning desperately for Fletcher. She caught a glimpse of movement among the rocks. Fletcher, working his way closer while the sheriff and deputies provided covering fire. Last chance, Daggett, Garvey shouted. Surrender now, go to hell, Daggett snarled, backing toward a narrow crevice in the rocks, a potential escape route. Felicity knew she couldn't let him take her into that confined space. Summoning all her strength, she drove her elbow hard into his stomach, simultaneously stamping on his foot. Daggett's grip loosened just enough. Felicity wrenched herself free, dropping to the ground and rolling away as Fletcher burst from his cover, tackling Daggett before he could recover. The two men grappled fiercely, Daggett's gun discharging harmlessly into the ground. Fletcher delivered a powerful punch that sent Daggett reeling, but the outlaw recovered quickly, drawing a knife from his boot. Felicity scrambled for Daggett's fallen pistol as the men fought. Her fingers closed around the grip just as Daggett slashed at Fletcher, the blade catching his arm and drawing blood. Fletcher, she cried in alarm. Despite his injury, Fletcher pressed his attack, driving Daggett back toward the edge of a steep slope. With a desperate lunge, Daggett tried to stab Fletcher in the chest, but Fletcher caught his wrist. The two men locked in a deadly struggle at the precipice. Felicity raised the pistol, but she couldn't fire, not with the men so closely entwined. Nearby, she could hear the sheriff and his men exchanging gunfire with Daggett's remaining accomplices. With a sudden, powerful move, Fletcher twisted Daggett's arm, forcing him to drop the knife. Daggett howled in pain and fury, lashing out with his free hand. The blow caught Fletcher off balance, and for a heart-stopping moment, both men teetered at the edge of the slope. Then Daggett was falling, dragging Fletcher with him. No. Felicity screamed, rushing forward as the men tumbled down the rocky incline, raising dust and dislodging stones as they went. They came to rest at the bottom, neither moving. Felicity half ran, half slid down the slope toward them, heedless of the scrapes and bruises she accumulated along the way. Fletcher lay still, Daggett's motionless form beside him. As Felicity reached them, she saw blood matting Fletcher's hair, his face pale beneath the dirt and smoke stains. Fletcher, she whispered, dropping to her knees beside him. Please, no. With trembling fingers, she felt for a pulse at his neck, nearly collapsing with relief when she found it steady and strong beneath her touch. Fletcher's eyelids fluttered, then opened. Felicity, he murmured, are you hurt? A laugh that was half sob escaped her. Am I hurt? You're the one who fell down a hillside fighting an armed man. Fletcher's lips curved in a weak smile. Had to make an impression on my new wife. Felicity pressed her forehead to his, tears of relief streaming down her face. You succeeded admirably, Daggett. Fletcher asked, grimacing as he tried to sit up. Felicity glanced at the outlaw. Not moving, I think he hit his head on the rocks. As if confirming her assessment, Sheriff Garvey appeared at the top of the slope. Everyone all right down there? Fletcher's injured but alive, Felicity called back. Daggett is unconscious or worse. Stay put, Garvey instructed. We've got the other two. Doc Hudson's with us. We'll bring him down to you. While they waited, Felicity helped Fletcher sit up against a boulder, her hands gentle as she examined the cut on his arm and the fresh wound on his head. How bad is it? He asked, wincing. You'll live, she assured him. Though you might wish otherwise when the doctor starts stitching you up. Fletcher caught her hand, his expression turning serious. I thought I'd lost you when they took you from the burning cabin. I knew you'd come for me, Felicity said softly. I never doubted it for a moment. Fletcher's thumb traced circles on her palm. I meant what I asked you before all this happened, about staying, about being my wife for real. And I meant my answer, Felicity replied, her heart full. Yes, Fletcher Ryder, I'll stay with you. I'll be your wife in truth, not just in name. His smile was brilliant despite his injuries. Even though our courtship has been rather unconventional, Felicity laughed. I think we've established that nothing about us is conventional. She leaned forward to press a gentle kiss to his lips, and I wouldn't have it any other way. 2 months later, Felicity stood in Mrs. Peabody's guest bedroom, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. The white dress was simple but elegant, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, a gift from the ladies of Copper Creek, who had insisted on helping prepare for the proper wedding ceremony their beloved neighbors deserved. The explanation Fletcher had crafted for their unusual situation had been accepted with surprising ease. They had indeed married hastily in Denver, but wished to reaffirm their vows properly before friends and neighbors after their ordeal. No one questioned the story, though Felicity suspected several of the town's more perceptive residents understood the truth and simply chose not to mention it. You look beautiful, Mrs. Peabody declared, adjusting the small wreath of wildflowers in Felicity's hair. Fletcher won't know what hit him. Felicity smiled, a blush warming her cheeks. Thank you for everything you've done, not just today, but since I arrived. Mrs. Peabody patted her hand. Copper Creek takes care of its own, my dear. And you've been one of us from the day Fletcher brought you home. With a wink, she added, even if the circumstances were a bit creative. Before Felicity could respond to this hint that the older woman had guessed more than she let on, a knock sounded at the door. James Edwards entered, resplendent in his Sunday best. It's time, he announced. Everyone's gathered at the church. He offered his arm to Felicity. I'm honored you asked me to give you away. Who better than the man who helped save my life? Felicity replied warmly, taking his arm. The short walk to the church was like a victory parade, with townspeople lining the street to offer good wishes. The story of Fletcher and Felicity's ordeal, the abduction, the chase, and Fletcher's brave rescue had become something of a local legend, growing more romantic with each retelling. Inside the church, Fletcher waited at the altar, tall and handsome in a new suit. His face, healed now from the injuries sustained in the fight with Daggett, lit up when he saw her. The love in his eyes as she walked toward him brought tears to Felicity's own. The ceremony was simple but profound. As they exchanged vows, real ones this time, Felicity marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From strangers to pretend spouses to true partners, their path had been unconventional but undeniably right. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Collins declared. Again, he added with a smile, drawing chuckles from the congregation who believed they were witnessing a renewal rather than a first ceremony. Fletcher's kiss was tender and promising, sealing their union before God and their community. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, Felicity felt a profound sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since losing her parents. Copper Creek had become her home. Fletcher had become her family. And the future that had seemed so uncertain when she'd collapsed in the dusty Main Street 3 months ago now stretched before her, bright with promise. The celebration afterward was joyous, a town-wide party with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice their number. Sheriff Garvey offered a toast to their health and happiness, while Mrs. Peabody tearfully declared she'd never seen a more perfect match. As evening fell, Fletcher led Felicity away from the festivities toward their new home, a larger cabin he'd built on the site of the one that had burned. The furniture inside was all his own creation, each piece crafted with loving attention to detail. Welcome home, Mrs. Ryder, Fletcher said softly as he carried her across the threshold. For real this time. Felicity wrapped her arms around his neck, her heart full to bursting. It was real from the beginning, she murmured. We just didn't know it yet. Later, as they lay together in the peace of their wedding night, Felicity traced the scar on Fletcher's arm, a permanent reminder of his battle with Daggett. I received a letter from my uncle yesterday, she said. I finally wrote to explain everything that happened. Fletcher's fingers played with a strand of her hair. What did he say? He was relieved to know I'm safe. He invited us to visit whenever we can make the journey." Felicity smiled. "He also said my father would have approved of my adventure into marriage, as he called it." "Smart man," Fletcher commented, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Though I'm not sure he would have approved of the method," Felicity laughed. "Actually, my father always did say I had an unconventional approach to problem solving. Collapsing in a strange town and being claimed as a wife by a man you'd never met," Fletcher grinned. "Yes, I'd call that unconventional." Felicity's expression softened as she gazed at her husband. "I thank God every day that it was you who found me, Fletcher Ryder." "And I thank God every day that you stayed," Fletcher replied, drawing her closer. "Even if it did take a stagecoach robbery, a burning cabin, and a shootout with outlaws to convince you." "Some women are just hard to impress," Felicity teased, her eyes dancing with joy. As Fletcher's lips found hers once more, Felicity silently marveled at the strange and wonderful path that had brought her to this moment. She had begun her journey west, seeking her only remaining family, never imagining she would create a new family of her own along the way. What had started as a desperate charade had become her most precious reality. She was Felicity Ryder now, not in pretense, but in truth. And the love that had bloomed between two strangers in extraordinary circumstances would continue to grow in the ordinary days ahead, stronger for the adversity that had forged it. In the safety of her husband's arms, Felicity finally knew what it meant to be home. 1 year later, Felicity stood on the porch of their home, watching as Fletcher worked in the yard with their 4-month-old son, Franklin. The baby, named for Felicity's father, lay on a blanket in the shade, cooing happily as Fletcher showed him a small wooden rattle he had carved. "He's too young to appreciate your craftsmanship," Felicity called with a smile. Fletcher looked up, his face alight with the joy that their son always brought him. "Never too young to develop good taste," he countered, scooping up the baby and bringing him to Felicity. As she took their son in her arms, Felicity marveled at how completely her life had transformed. Copper Creek was thriving, with Fletcher's furniture business expanding to fill orders from as far away as San Francisco. James Edwards had published a series of articles based on her father's research, bringing scholarly attention to the region's rich archaeological heritage without mentioning the silver mine that had driven Daggett's deadly pursuit. "A letter came from my uncle today," Felicity said, bouncing Franklin gently as he grabbed for her hair. "He's planning to visit next month, says he can't wait any longer to meet his grandnephew." "We'll have to finish the guest room furniture," Fletcher noted, his arms slipping around her waist as they gazed out at the town that had become their home. From this vantage point, they could see the church where they had properly married, the general store where Fletcher had bought Felicity's first dress in Copper Creek, and the street where she had collapsed into his arms that fateful day. "Sometimes I wonder," Felicity mused, leaning into her husband's embrace, "what would have happened if I'd collapsed in front of someone else's door, or if you hadn't been so quick to claim me as your wife." Fletcher pressed a kiss to her temple. "I don't believe that would have happened. Some things are meant to be, even if they take an unusual path to get there." Felicity smiled, turning to meet his gaze. The love she found there still took her breath away, even after all they had been through together. "Mrs. Ryder," Fletcher murmured, using the name that had begun as a deception and become her most treasured identity. "Yes, Mr. Ryder," she replied, her eyes dancing with happiness. "I believe our son is falling asleep and I haven't properly kissed my wife today." Felicity laughed softly. "Well, we can't have that, can we?" As Fletcher's lips met hers in a kiss that promised forever, Felicity closed her eyes in gratitude. She had thought herself a stranger in a strange land, only to find herself claimed, protected, and ultimately, truly and deeply loved. And in that love, she had found her home,